Mother bear with cubs. Beg this man to be let into the truck. Because of snow outside, what happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Every bit of your support helps us create even more amazing stories for you. The snow fell heavily that December evening, blanketing the narrow mountain road in white. Logan Carter gripped his steering wheel tightly, his knuckles turning as pale as the landscape around him. He hadn't expected the storm to hit so suddenly. The weather report had mentioned light flurries, but this was turning into a full-blown blizzard. "Just my luck," Logan muttered, squinting through his foggy windshield. The wipers worked frantically, barely keeping up with the relentless snowfall. He was still at least 30 miles from the nearest town, and the road was getting more treacherous by the minute. The old pickup truck groaned as Logan eased off the accelerator. Visibility was dropping fast. The headlights illuminated only a few feet ahead, revealing nothing but swirling white. His heart pounded uncomfortably in his chest. Logan had grown up in these mountains, but even he knew when nature had the upper hand. "I need to stop," he said to himself, his breath forming small clouds in the cooling cab of his truck. The heater was working, but the biting cold still seeped through the aging door seals. He spotted a small clearing just ahead, partially sheltered by towering pine trees. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do until the storm passed. Logan carefully steered the truck off the road and into the clearing. The tires crunched over the fresh snow as he brought the vehicle to a stop. He turned the engine to idle, knowing he needed to conserve gas but also desperately needing the warmth. The wind howled outside, rocking the truck slightly as if trying to test its resolve. Reaching into the back seat, Logan grabbed his thermos of coffee and took a long sip of the now lukewarm liquid. He checked his cell phone. No signal, as expected. He was alone out here, at least until the storm passed. Logan adjusted his thick wool hat and settled in for a long night. He must have dozed off because the sudden thump against the side of his truck jolted him awake. Logan sat up straight, his heart racing. Had a tree branch fallen? But when the sound came again, it was clearly not a branch. Something, or someone, was outside his truck. Logan wiped condensation from the driver's side window and peered out. At first, he saw nothing but darkness and swirling snow. Then a shape moved through the white haze. A large shape. Logan's blood turned colder than the air outside. A bear. A massive bear was walking around his truck. Logan had encountered bears before. It was common in these mountains, but never during a blizzard, and never this close to his vehicle. He held his breath, hoping the animal would simply move on, searching for better shelter elsewhere. But then, as the bear moved into the beam of his headlights, Logan saw something that made his heart skip a beat. The bear wasn't alone. 3 small cubs huddled behind her, their tiny bodies nearly buried in the snow as they struggled to follow their mother. "Oh my God," Logan whispered, watching as the mother bear guided her cubs through the worsening storm. They looked exhausted, their movements sluggish. Logan knew enough about wildlife to understand that these bears should have been in hibernation by now. Something must have disturbed their winter den, forcing them to seek new shelter during the worst possible time. The mother bear stopped directly in front of his truck, her breath visible in the cold air. Logan remained perfectly still, afraid that any movement might spook her. But what happened next defied everything Logan thought he knew about wild animals. The bear rose up slightly on her hind legs and placed her front paws against the front of his truck. Her eyes, intelligent and desperate, seemed to look directly at him. One of the cubs collapsed in the snow, its small body shivering violently. Logan couldn't believe what he was seeing. It was almost as if the mother bear was asking for help, but that couldn't be right. Bears didn't seek out humans, especially not for assistance. Yet here she was, directly in front of him, looking at him with what appeared to be desperation. The smallest cub let out a pitiful cry that somehow carried through the howling wind and the metal barrier of the truck. It was a sound that struck something deep within Logan, something primal and impossible to ignore. The mother bear turned to her struggling cub, nudged it gently, then looked back at Logan. His hands trembled as he considered his options. Opening the door to his truck with a family of bears just feet away went against every survival instinct Logan possessed. But leaving them to face the brutal storm seemed equally impossible. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and those cubs, already weakened, couldn't survive much longer in these conditions. The mother bear made another noise, a low, rumbling sound that wasn't quite a growl. It sounded almost like a plea. Logan had never heard anything like it before. He watched as she nudged another struggling cub forward, then again looked directly at him. "This is insane," Logan whispered to himself. But sometimes, he realized, insanity was the only sane response to an impossible situation. Very slowly, Logan reached for the door handle. Whatever happened next would change everything. Logan's fingers closed around the cold metal of the door handle. A voice in his head screamed at him to stop, to think about what he was doing. Bears were wild animals, unpredictable and dangerous, especially a mother with cubs. But another part of him, perhaps the part that had grown up respecting the delicate balance between humans and nature in these mountains, urged him forward. "I must be out of my mind," Logan muttered, his breath fogging the window. He cracked the door open just an inch. The howling wind immediately forced its way in, bringing with it a flurry of snowflakes and the bone-chilling cold of the blizzard. The mother bear took a step back, her massive body tensing. Logan froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. For a terrifying moment he thought she might charge. Instead, the bear made that strange rumbling sound again and nudged one of her cubs forward. The tiny bear wobbled on unsteady legs, its fur caked with ice and snow. The sight broke something in Logan's heart. "Okay," he whispered, though he knew the bear couldn't understand him. "But we're going to do this slowly." Logan opened the door a bit wider and carefully slid out of the driver's seat, keeping the truck between himself and the bear family. The wind hit him like a physical blow, nearly knocking him off his feet. Snow stung his exposed face, and within seconds his beard was coated in white. If he was feeling the brutal force of the storm this intensely, how much worse was it for the cubs with their small bodies? Moving with deliberate slowness, Logan made his way around to the passenger side of the truck and opened the rear door. The bears watched his every move. The mother bear's eyes never left him, but she made no aggressive gestures. It was as if some unspoken understanding had formed between them. A temporary truce born of desperate circumstances. "In here," Logan called over the roar of the wind, gesturing toward the open door. "It's warm." To his astonishment, the mother bear seemed to understand. She nudged her cubs toward the truck. The first cub approached cautiously, its nose twitching as it sniffed the unfamiliar scent of the vehicle. After a moment's hesitation, it climbed awkwardly into the back seat, followed quickly by its siblings. Logan stood in stunned disbelief as the three cubs huddled together on his rear bench seat. Their tiny bodies shivered violently, and their eyes, surprisingly expressive, looked up at him with what seemed like gratitude. Then came the moment Logan had been both anticipating and dreading. The mother bear approached the open door. She was massive up close, her shoulders as high as Logan's chest. One swipe of her powerful paws could easily kill a man. Logan stepped back, giving her space, fighting every instinct that told him to run. The bear paused at the threshold of the truck, her massive head turning to look at Logan. Their eyes met, and in that moment Logan felt something he couldn't explain. A connection, a mutual recognition of the strange circumstances that had brought them together. Then, with surprising grace for such a large animal, the mother bear climbed into the truck beside her cubs. Logan gently closed the door, still not quite believing what was happening. He circled back to the driver's side, opened the door, and slipped inside. The truck now contained one terrified human and 4 bears, a situation so absurd that Logan almost laughed despite his fear. The cab of the truck was instantly filled with the scent of wet fur and the sound of the cubs whimpering. Logan turned up the heater as high as it would go. The mother bear settled on the floor of the back seat, her large body barely fitting in the confined space. Her cubs immediately huddled against her, seeking warmth. "This is definitely not how I expected my night to go," Logan said aloud, his voice shaky with adrenaline. The mother bear's eyes remained fixed on him, alert but strangely calm. For several long minutes they sat in this bizarre standoff, man and bears sharing the warm sanctuary of the truck while the blizzard raged outside. Logan kept his movements slow and deliberate, afraid that any sudden gesture might trigger the mother bear's protective instincts. Gradually, the cubs began to warm up. Their violent shivering subsided, and they nestled closer to their mother. One of them, the smallest, let out a soft sound that was almost like a sigh of relief. Despite the danger of his situation, Logan felt a surge of satisfaction. At least they wouldn't freeze to death tonight. As the hours crept by, the storm showed no signs of letting up. The wind buffeted the truck, and snow continued to pile up around them. Logan checked his watch, nearly midnight. His initial plan to wait out the storm was complicated now by his unexpected passengers. He couldn't drive with a family of bears in his truck, but he also couldn't ask them to leave in these conditions. His eyelids grew heavy as the adrenaline began to wear off. The rhythmic sound of the bear's breathing created an unlikely lullaby. Despite his best efforts to stay alert, Logan felt himself drifting off. A sharp crack jolted him awake. For a disoriented moment, Logan didn't know where he was or why there was a bear staring at him from his back seat. Then reality came rushing back. The crack came again, louder this time, followed by an ominous groaning sound. Logan peered through the windshield, wiping away condensation with his sleeve. In the beam of his headlights, he saw the massive pine tree swaying dangerously. Its trunk was bending at an unnatural angle, weighed down by heavy snow and battered by the relentless wind. "That's not good," Logan murmured. As if in response to his words, the tree gave one final resounding crack. Time seemed to slow as Logan watched the enormous pine begin its descent, falling directly toward the truck. "Hold on," Logan shouted instinctively, though he knew the bears couldn't understand him. He threw his arms up to protect his face just as the tree crashed down onto the hood of his truck. The impact was deafening. Metal crunched and glass shattered as the windshield imploded under the weight of the massive trunk. Shards of glass sprayed into the cab. The truck lurched backward, its frame groaning in protest. The mother bear roared in alarm, and her cubs squealed in terror. When the chaos subsided, Logan cautiously lowered his arms. Cold air and snow were pouring in through the shattered windshield. The front of the truck was completely crushed under the weight of the fallen tree. The engine sputtered once, twice, and then died with a final, pathetic whine. With it went the heater, their only defense against the bitter cold. "No, no, no," Logan muttered, frantically turning the key in the ignition. The engine made a grinding noise but wouldn't start. The dashboard lights flickered weakly and then went dark. The truck was dead. Behind him, the mother bear was growing agitated, sensing the new danger. Her cubs huddled against her, whimpering in fear. The temperature in the cab was already dropping rapidly as the frigid air poured in through the broken windshield. Logan's mind raced. They couldn't stay here. Without the heater, the truck would soon be as cold as the outside. But the alternative, venturing out into the blizzard with a family of bears, seemed equally impossible. That's when Logan remembered the old cabin. Years ago, during hunting trips with his father, they had stayed at a small Forest Service cabin not far from this very spot. If his memory served him correctly, it was less than a mile through the woods. In normal weather, it would be an easy walk. In this blizzard, with night fallen and a family of bears in tow, it would be a desperate gamble. But as the cold air bit at his exposed skin and the bears grew more restless in the back seat, Logan realized they had no choice. "Okay," he said, turning to face the mother bear. Her eyes gleamed in the darkness, intelligent and wary. "We need to move. All of us." Logan reached into the glove compartment and pulled out his emergency flashlight. Its beam seemed pitifully weak against the darkness outside. Next, he grabbed his heavy winter coat from behind the seat and put it on, zipping it up to his chin. From under the seat, he retrieved a small emergency pack that contained some basic supplies: a compass, matches, a small first aid kit, and a few energy bars. The mother bear watched his every move, tense but still remarkably calm given the circumstances. Her cubs were pressed against her, their tiny eyes reflecting the beam of the flashlight. "I know a place," Logan said, speaking to the bear as if she could understand. "Somewhere warm and safe, but we have to go out there to reach it." He pointed toward the broken windshield and the howling darkness beyond. The bear followed his gesture, then looked back at him. That strange connection he had felt earlier returned, a wordless understanding that transcended the natural barriers between their species. Logan took a deep breath and reached for the door handle. This time, when he stepped outside into the storm, he wasn't alone. And what awaited them in the dark forest would test both man and bear in ways neither could have imagined. The full force of the blizzard hit Logan like a physical blow. The wind tore at his clothing, and snow pelted his face with stinging intensity. He staggered slightly, bracing himself against the side of the truck. The temperature had dropped even further. It must have been well below zero now. Every breath burned in his lungs. Logan turned back toward the open door, shining his flashlight inside. The mother bear was watching him, her massive head tilted slightly as if assessing the situation. Her cubs pressed against her, visibly trembling. "Come on," Logan called over the howling wind. "We can't stay here." For a heart-stopping moment, he thought the bear might refuse to leave the relative shelter of the truck. If she decided to stay, Logan knew he couldn't force her. Despite the strange trust that had formed between them, she was still a wild animal, unpredictable and potentially dangerous. To his relief, the mother bear rose to her feet, causing the truck to shift under her weight. She nudged her cubs forward, urging them toward the open door. One by one, they reluctantly climbed out into the snow, their small paws sinking deep into the white drifts. The mother bear followed, her massive body dwarfing her offspring as she stood protectively beside them. Logan zipped his coat up tighter and pulled his hat lower over his ears. The wind cut through his layers like they were nothing, and already he couldn't feel his fingertips. The bears, with their thick winter coats, were better equipped for the cold, but even they weren't meant to be out in a blizzard of this magnitude. "This way," Logan said, gesturing with his flashlight toward the tree line. He knew from experience that the forest would provide some shelter from the wind, making their journey slightly more bearable. He began trudging through the deep snow, each step requiring significant effort. The drifts came up to his knees in places, and the wind kept pushing against him as if trying to force him back. Logan glanced behind him frequently, making sure the bears were following. The mother bear was struggling to forge a path for her cubs. The snow was simply too deep for the little ones. Logan watched as she pushed forward, creating a trail with her large body that her cubs could follow in. Even so, the smallest cub was falling behind, its tiny legs unable to keep up. Without thinking, Logan backtracked. The mother bear watched warily as he approached her trailing cub. Moving slowly, telegraphing his intentions, Logan reached down and, holding his breath, gently lifted the small bear into his arms. The cub weighed more than he expected, perhaps 30 pounds, and it squirmed in his grasp. Logan froze, expecting the mother bear to charge him for touching her young. Instead, she made that strange rumbling sound again. Not quite a growl, but not quite a purr either. She moved closer, sniffing at Logan and her cub, then seemed to nod slightly before turning to continue breaking trail for her other 2 cubs. "Guess we're in this together now, little one," Logan whispered to the cub in his arms. The tiny bear had stopped squirming and was now pressed against Logan's chest, seeking warmth. Its fur was wet and icy, but underneath Logan could feel the rapid beating of its heart. They moved deeper into the forest, where the dense pines provided some shelter from the relentless wind. The snow wasn't quite as deep here, but visibility was still poor. Logan swept his flashlight beam ahead, trying to identify landmarks that might guide them to the cabin. It had been years since he'd been in this part of the woods, and everything looked different under a blanket of snow and darkness. The mother bear stayed close to Logan now, seeming to understand that he was trying to lead them to safety. Her other 2 cubs trudged along in the path she created, occasionally making small whimpering sounds that twisted Logan's heart. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 20 minutes, Logan spotted a familiar rock formation through the trees. His spirits lifted. If his memory served him correctly, the cabin should be just beyond the large boulder that locals called Sleeping Giant, due to its vague resemblance to a reclining human figure. "We're getting close," Logan said, adjusting the cub in his arms. The little bear had grown quiet, which worried him. He couldn't tell if it was simply exhausted or if the cold was taking a more serious toll. As they rounded the Sleeping Giant, Logan's flashlight beam caught something that made him stop in his tracks. Ahead, barely visible through the swirling snow, was the dark outline of the cabin. But something was wrong. Even from this distance, Logan could see that the door was ajar, swinging slightly in the wind. The cabin should have been empty, locked up for the winter months. Someone, or something, had been here recently. Logan tensed, immediately more alert. The mother bear sensed his change in demeanor and stopped beside him, her head raised as she scented the air. A low, warning growl rumbled in her chest. "Stay here," Logan whispered, gently setting down the cub he'd been carrying. The little bear immediately scurried to its mother's side. Logan approached the cabin cautiously, his flashlight beam darting around for any sign of danger. As he got closer, he could see footprints in the snow leading to and from the cabin door. Human footprints, partially filled in by fresh snow but still visible. They weren't old. The door creaked as Logan pushed it open wider. The interior of the cabin was pitch black. Logan swept his flashlight around the single room. The beam revealed a scene of disarray. The few pieces of furniture, a small table, a couple of chairs, a simple cot, had been overturned. Supplies from the emergency stores that the Forest Service maintained were scattered across the floor. But most concerning was what Logan saw on the small wooden table that had been pushed against the far wall. Several small metal traps, the kind used for catching marten or fox, were laid out alongside a hunting rifle and boxes of ammunition. Poachers. Logan had heard rumors of increased poaching activity in the national forest over the past year. The sudden realization hit him like a blow to the stomach. The bear family hadn't left their den because of the storm. They'd fled because poachers had found it, likely planning to kill the mother for her pelt and capture the cubs for the illegal exotic pet trade. A sound outside made Logan whirl around. The mother bear and her cubs had followed him to the cabin despite his instruction to stay back. They stood in the doorway, snow swirling around them. The mother bear's nose worked furiously, taking in the scents of the cabin. When she caught the smell of the traps, she let out a low, menacing growl that raised the hair on the back of Logan's neck. "It's okay," Logan said softly, though he knew it wasn't. The bears had fled one danger, only to potentially encounter another. But at least the poachers weren't here now, and the cabin, ransacked as it was, still offered shelter from the deadly storm. Logan quickly moved to close and secure the door behind the bears. There was no lock, but he pushed one of the fallen chairs under the doorknob as a makeshift barricade. Next, he gathered the traps carefully, making sure they weren't set, and stowed them in a high cupboard where they wouldn't be a danger to the cubs. The rifle presented a different problem. Logan had no love for poachers, but he wasn't a thief. Still, leaving a loaded weapon in a cabin with 3 bear cubs seemed like a recipe for disaster. After a moment's hesitation, he unloaded the rifle, storing the ammunition in one cupboard and the unloaded weapon in another. The mother bear had settled in a corner of the cabin, her large body creating a warm nest for her cubs. They huddled against her, their eyes following Logan's movements around the small space. The rumbling growl had subsided, but Logan could still sense the mother bear's unease. She might not understand exactly what the traps and rifle meant, but her instincts clearly told her they represented danger. Logan set about trying to make the cabin habitable. He righted the overturned furniture and gathered the scattered emergency supplies. There were some canned goods, matches, a couple of lanterns with fuel, and, thank goodness, a stack of heavy wool blankets. He found the small wood stove intact, with a meager supply of firewood stacked beside it. Within 15 minutes, Logan had a small fire burning in the stove. The warmth began to spread through the cabin, and Logan could feel sensation painfully returning to his frozen extremities. He hung his wet outer layers near the stove to dry and wrapped one of the wool blankets around his shoulders. The bear family watched him work, the cubs gradually relaxing as the cabin warmed up. The smallest one, the cub Logan had carried, actually left its mother's side and cautiously approached the stove, drawn by the heat. Logan remained perfectly still as the tiny bear sniffed at the air near the stove, its curiosity momentarily overcoming its fear. "Careful," Logan murmured. "It's hot." As if understanding his warning, the cub kept a respectful distance from the stove. After satisfying its curiosity, it returned to its mother and siblings, but not before giving Logan a long look that seemed almost human in its thoughtfulness. Outside, the storm continued to rage. Wind howled through the cracks in the cabin walls, and snow piled up against the single window. But inside, man and bears had found a fragile sanctuary. Logan settled on the cot across the room from the bear family, keeping a respectful distance. He was exhausted, his body aching from the ordeal they'd been through. But despite his fatigue, his mind raced. The poachers could return at any time. And even if they didn't, what would happen when the storm cleared? He couldn't keep the bears here indefinitely, but he also couldn't bear the thought of them returning to the wilderness with poachers on their trail. As these thoughts tumbled through his mind, Logan didn't notice that the smallest cub had once again left its mother's side. He only became aware of the little bear's presence when he felt a gentle pressure against his leg. Looking down in surprise, Logan saw that the cub had curled up against him, apparently having decided he was trustworthy. The mother bear watched from across the room but made no move to call her cub back. It was as if some silent agreement had been reached, a truce between species born of shared danger and mutual need. Logan carefully adjusted his blanket to cover the small cub as well. Within moments, the tiny bear was asleep, its sides rising and falling with each breath. Despite the danger they still faced, Logan felt a sense of peace wash over him. He leaned his head back against the wall and closed his eyes, just for a moment. He didn't mean to fall asleep, but the warmth of the fire, the rhythmic sound of the bear's breathing, and his own profound exhaustion conspired against him. Logan drifted off, one hand resting protectively near the sleeping cub. The sound that woke him was faint but unmistakable, the crunch of boots on snow approaching the cabin. Logan's eyes snapped open, his heart instantly racing. The fire in the stove had died down to embers, casting the cabin in shadows. How long had he been asleep? The mother bear was already alert, her massive head raised and turned toward the door. Her cubs, including the one that had been sleeping near Logan, had returned to her side. She made no sound, but her entire body was tense, ready to defend her young. Logan moved silently to the window, careful to stay to one side so he wouldn't be visible from outside. Peering through a corner of the frosted glass, he saw them. Two figures trudging through the snow toward the cabin, rifles slung over their shoulders. The poachers had returned. His mind raced. There was nowhere to hide in the small cabin, certainly nowhere that could conceal a full-grown bear and 3 cubs. Fighting wasn't an option. The poachers were armed, and Logan had only his hunting knife. Running would mean facing the blizzard again, which might be just as deadly as confronting the poachers. As the footsteps drew nearer, Logan made a split-second decision. It was risky, perhaps foolish, but it was the only plan he could think of. He turned to the mother bear and, moving slowly, approached her. "I need you to trust me," he whispered, looking directly into the bear's intelligent eyes. "Just a little longer." The bear regarded him silently, her gaze inscrutable. Logan didn't know if she could understand his intent, but he had to try. He gently guided the cubs toward the darkest corner of the cabin, behind the wood stove where the shadows were deepest. Then, using hand gestures and soft whispers, he tried to indicate that the mother bear should join them. Stay hidden, stay quiet. To his amazement, the bear seemed to understand. She moved silently to the corner with her cubs, her large body obscuring them from immediate view. Logan quickly threw another log on the fire to create more shadows and smoke, then moved toward the door, positioning himself to appear casual but blocking the direct line of sight to the corner where the bears huddled. Just as he got into position, a heavy knock rattled the cabin door. "Forest Service," a gruff voice called out. "Open up." Logan knew immediately it was a lie. The Forest Service wouldn't be out in a blizzard like this, and they certainly wouldn't have left traps and an unsecured rifle in a public cabin. His suspicions were confirmed when he heard muffled laughter from the other side of the door. Taking a deep breath to steady his nerves, Logan called back, "Coming!" He glanced once more at the bear family. The mother bear was watching him intently, absolutely still except for her eyes which gleamed in the dim light. Logan removed the chair from under the doorknob and opened the door just enough to see out. 2 men stood on the small porch, their faces partially obscured by heavy scarves and snow-crusted hats. Behind them, barely visible through the swirling snow, Logan could make out the outline of a snowmobile. "Thank God," Logan said, feigning relief. "I thought I was going to die out here. My truck got crushed by a falling tree about a mile back." The men exchanged glances. The taller of the two spoke. "Tough luck. Mind if we come in? We're checking the cabins after the storm." Without waiting for a response, the shorter man pushed past Logan into the cabin. He stomped the snow from his boots and looked around, his gaze immediately going to the cupboards where Logan had stowed the traps and rifle. Logan's heart pounded. From where the men stood, the bears were still hidden in shadow, but one wrong move, one curious cub wandering into the light, would reveal their presence. The taller man had remained by the door, his hand resting casually on his rifle. "You didn't happen to see anything unusual out there, did you, before the storm hit?" Logan pretended to consider the question. "Can't say that I did, just lots of snow and wind. Why do you ask?" "No reason," the man said too quickly. "Just curious. We've had reports of unusual wildlife activity in the area." Logan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. "What kind of wildlife?" The men exchanged another look. The shorter one shrugged. "Bears," he said finally. "Family of 'em, mother and cubs. They should be hibernating this time of year, but something spooked 'em. Forest Service is concerned they might pose a danger to hikers." It took every ounce of self-control for Logan not to glance toward the corner where the bears were hiding. "Haven't seen any bears," he said, hoping his voice sounded steady. "Wouldn't expect to in weather like this." The taller man nodded, but Logan could see suspicion in his eyes. "Mind if we take a look around?" Standard procedure. Before Logan could answer, a soft sound came from the shadowy corner, the unmistakable whimper of a bear cub. Both men froze, their heads turning toward the source of the noise. "What was that?" the shorter man demanded, his hand moving to his belt where a large hunting knife was sheathed. Logan's mind raced. "Probably just the wind in the chimney," he said, moving subtly to block their path to the corner. "This old cabin makes all sorts of noises." The taller man's eyes narrowed. "Didn't sound like wind to me." He unslung his rifle, no longer maintaining the pretense of being Forest Service. Time seemed to slow as Logan realized the situation was about to explode into violence. He had seconds, at most, before the men discovered the bears. And once they did, he had no doubt they would shoot the mother and take the cubs. Just as the shorter man took a step toward the shadowy corner, the cabin door burst open with a bang. All three men whirled toward the sound, startled by the sudden intrusion. Framed in the doorway, covered in snow and looking like an apparition from a winter nightmare, stood a woman. Her dark hair was partially covered by a Forest Service hat, and the badge on her parka gleamed in the light from the stove. "U.S. Forest Service," she announced, her voice cutting through the tense atmosphere like a knife. "I'm going to need to see some identification, gentlemen." The poacher's expressions shifted from surprise to wariness. The taller man lowered his rifle slightly but didn't sling it back over his shoulder. "We're Forest Service too," he lied smoothly, "just checking the cabins after the storm." The woman's eyebrow arched skeptically. "Really? That's interesting because I know every ranger assigned to this district and I don't recognize either of you." She stepped fully into the cabin, pushing back her hood to reveal a stern face. "Badges, please." The poachers hesitated, clearly weighing their options. 3 against 1 would normally be favorable odds, but the woman's confident demeanor suggested she wasn't alone. As if confirming this suspicion, she glanced over her shoulder and called out, "Mike, radio this in while I check their credentials." Logan didn't know if Mike existed or was a bluff, but the tactic worked. The poachers exchanged a quick look, and without warning, the shorter man lunged toward the cupboard where Logan had stored their rifle. "Don't!" Logan shouted, moving to intercept him. But before either man could reach the weapon, a deafening roar filled the small cabin. The mother bear had emerged from her hiding place, rising to her full height, her massive form suddenly seeming to fill the room. Her cubs scurried behind the wood stove, out of the way of the impending confrontation. The poachers froze in terror. The mother bear's roar had been more effective than any human threat could have been. She dropped back to all fours but continued to growl, the sound reverberating through the cabin's wooden walls. The forest ranger, for Logan now realized she was indeed genuine, had drawn her sidearm at the first sign of trouble. Now she kept it trained on the poachers, her expression hard. "Hands where I can see them," she commanded. "Now!" The stunned poachers complied, raising their hands slowly, their eyes never leaving the massive bear that stood between them and the exit. "Logan Carter?" the ranger asked, glancing briefly at Logan. Surprised that she knew his name, Logan nodded. "Savannah Reed," she introduced herself. "We've been tracking these poachers for weeks, and we've been looking for you since your truck was reported abandoned on the mountain road." Her gaze shifted to the bear family, her expression softening slightly. "I see you found our missing bears." "More like they found me," Logan replied, still keeping a wary eye on the poachers. "How did you know where to look?" Savannah smiled grimly. "When the storm hit, we figured anyone stranded would head for the nearest shelter. This cabin was the closest to where your truck was found." She paused, her smile fading. "But I didn't expect to find you in the company of our local wildlife, or that they'd be so comfortable with human presence." The mother bear had calmed somewhat but remained on alert, her body positioned protectively between her cubs and the poachers. Remarkably, she seemed to recognize Savannah as an ally rather than a threat. "It's a long story," Logan said simply. "I look forward to hearing it," Savannah replied. She produced a set of handcuffs from her parka pocket. "But first, we need to deal with our friends here." As Savannah secured the poachers, Logan became aware of movement outside the cabin. True to her word, she hadn't come alone. 2 more forest rangers appeared in the doorway, snowshoes strapped to their boots and rifles at the ready. The next hour passed in a blur of activity. The poachers were escorted to a Forest Service snowcat that had somehow made it through the blizzard. Savannah explained that they'd been planning this operation for days, tracking the poachers' movements and waiting for the right moment to apprehend them. The storm had complicated matters but had also provided the perfect opportunity to catch them in the act. As for the bears, that presented a more complex problem. "Their den was destroyed by these guys," Savannah explained, gesturing toward the departing poachers. "We've been worried sick about them. A mother and cubs out in this weather." She shook her head. "But it seems they found an unlikely protector." Logan glanced at the bear family. The cubs had emerged from hiding and were once again huddled against their mother, watching the humans with curious eyes. The smallest one, the cub Logan had carried through the snow, actually left its mother's side and approached him, sniffing at his boot. "I've never seen anything like it," Savannah remarked, watching the interaction with amazement. "Bears don't usually trust humans this way, especially not a mother with cubs." "We've been through a lot together," Logan said simply, bending down to let the cubs sniff his hand. "Shared danger has a way of creating strange bonds." Savannah nodded thoughtfully. "Well, we need to get these bears to safety. There's a wildlife rehabilitation center about 30 miles from here. They have facilities for temporary housing until we can prepare a new den site, away from popular hunting areas." "Will they be safe there?" Logan asked, surprising himself with how much he cared about the answer. "Yes," Savannah assured him. "The center has experience with bear rehabilitation." And once spring comes, they'll be released back into the wild, in a protected area of the national forest. Logan felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. He was glad the bears would be safe, but the thought of saying goodbye to them, especially the little cub that had somehow bonded with him, was unexpectedly painful. As if sensing his thoughts, the smallest cub pressed against his leg, looking up at him with those remarkably expressive eyes. "Do you want to come with us to the center?" Savannah asked, watching the interaction with a smile. "We could use your help. These bears seem to trust you, which will make transporting them much easier." Logan didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said, gently stroking the cub's head. "I'd like that." Outside, the storm was finally beginning to abate. The wind had died down, and the snow fell in gentle flakes rather than the blinding sheets of before. As Logan helped Savannah prepare the bears for transport, a process made infinitely easier by the strange trust that had formed between them, he reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought them together. A falling tree, a desperate mother, a blizzard, poachers. Each disaster had seemed like the worst possible luck at the time. Yet somehow, they had led to this moment of unexpected connection between species that were usually separated by fear and instinct. As they loaded the bears into the specially designed transport cage in the back of the Forest Service vehicle, Logan made sure the mother could see him at all times. Her calm demeanor throughout the process amazed even the experienced rangers. "It's like she knows we're helping," one of them remarked in awe. "She does," Logan replied with certainty. He didn't know how to explain the understanding that had developed between himself and the mother bear, but he knew it was real. When it was time to leave, Logan climbed into the back of the vehicle with the bears, unwilling to let them make the journey alone. The smallest cub immediately settled against him, and even the mother bear seemed to relax with his presence. As the vehicle began its careful journey down the mountain, Logan looked out at the winter landscape. The world was transformed by snow, made new and pristine. Somewhere in that vast wilderness, he knew, other animals were struggling to survive the harsh conditions. But these bears, his bears as he had begun to think of them, had found an unexpected ally in their fight for survival. And Logan, who had always considered himself a solitary man, had found something too. A connection he never could have imagined, and a purpose that would change the course of his life in ways he couldn't yet foresee. The smallest cub stirred against him, making a soft sound that was almost like a purr. Logan smiled and gently stroked its fur. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The journey to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center took nearly 3 hours. The storm had left the mountain roads treacherous, forcing their convoy to move at a crawl. In the back of the transport vehicle, Logan remained with the bears, speaking to them in soft, reassuring tones whenever a particularly rough patch of road caused the vehicle to lurch. The mother bear watched him with those intelligent eyes, seeming to understand that the discomfort was temporary and necessary. By the time they arrived at the center, the first pale light of dawn was breaking over the eastern mountains. The rehabilitation facility was larger than Logan had expected. A sprawling compound of buildings and outdoor enclosures nestled in a secluded valley, surrounded by dense forest on all sides. As the vehicle came to a stop in front of the main building, Logan saw several people hurrying out to meet them. They wore khaki uniforms similar to Savannah's, but with patches identifying them as wildlife rehabilitation specialists rather than forest rangers. Savannah opened the back doors of the transport vehicle and greeted Logan with a tired smile. "We made it. The wildlife team is ready for them." A tall, bearded man approached the vehicle, his expression shifting from professional interest to undisguised amazement when he saw Logan sitting calmly among the bear family. "I'm Doctor," Michael Hayes, he introduced himself, voice low and calm, despite his evident surprise. I'm the head veterinarian here. His eyes moved from Logan to the bears and back again. Savannah radioed ahead about your unusual situation, but I have to admit, seeing it is something else entirely. Logan carefully extracted himself from the smallest cub, which had fallen asleep against him. They've been through a lot, he said simply. They need a safe place to rest. Dr. Hayes nodded, his professional demeanor returning. We have a specialized enclosure prepared. It mimics their natural habitat as much as possible, with a man-made den and plenty of shelter from the elements. He paused, studying the mother bears with a trained eye. She doesn't appear injured, but we'll want to examine all of them thoroughly once they're settled. The transfer from the vehicle to the enclosure proved more challenging than Logan had anticipated. The mother bear, wary of the new surroundings and the unfamiliar humans, grew agitated as they attempted to guide her and her cubs into a temporary transport cage. She's stressed, Dr. Hayes observed, keeping his distance. This is normal behavior, but it could become dangerous. Logan moved closer to the mother bear, ignoring the concerned murmurs from the wildlife staff. It's okay, he said softly, looking directly into the bear's eyes. These people are going to help you. You and your cubs will be safe here. To the astonishment of everyone watching, the mother bear's aggressive posture gradually relaxed. She made that now familiar rumbling sound, not quite a growl, not quite a purr, and nudged her cubs toward the transport cage. One by one, they entered, with the mother following last. She paused at the entrance, looking back at Logan as if to confirm he was coming too. I'll be right behind you, Logan assured her, a lump forming in his throat. He hadn't expected to feel this emotional connection to a wild animal, yet here he was, communicating with her in ways that defied conventional understanding. The wildlife staff exchanged glances of disbelief as they wheeled the transport cage toward the bear enclosure. Savannah fell into step beside Logan. You know, I've worked with wildlife for 15 years, she said quietly. I've never seen anything like what you have with these bears. It's extraordinary. Logan shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention. We helped each other survive, that's all. Savannah gave him a sidelong glance. I think it's more than that. But whatever it is, we're grateful for it. Those bears might not have made it without you. The bear enclosure was impressive. A large, wooded area enclosed by a high fence, with a sturdy, cave-like structure built into one side that would serve as a temporary den. The staff opened the transport cage door remotely, allowing the bears to enter the enclosure at their own pace. The cubs ventured out first, curious despite their exhaustion. The mother followed more cautiously, her nose working constantly as she assessed the new environment. Once she seemed satisfied that there was no immediate danger, she guided her cubs toward the artificial den. Within minutes, all 4 bears had disappeared inside. They'll rest now, Doctor, Hayes explained, joining Logan at the observation area. The stress of transport, combined with everything they've been through, they're exhausted. We'll leave them alone for at least 24 hours before attempting any examinations. Logan nodded, unable to tear his eyes away from the den entrance. He felt strangely empty now that the bears were no longer in his direct care. It was an irrational feeling. He had known from the beginning that their paths would eventually diverge, but it was powerful nonetheless. You should rest too, Savannah suggested, noting his exhaustion. We have guest quarters for researchers and volunteers. You're welcome to stay as long as you like. Logan accepted gratefully. Now that the immediate crisis had passed, The full weight of his ordeal was catching up to him. His body ached from the cold and exertion, and his mind was foggy with fatigue. The guest quarters were simple but comfortable. A small cabin with basic amenities. Logan barely registered his surroundings before collapsing onto the bed. He was asleep within moments, his dreams filled with swirling snow and the sound of bear cubs whimpering. When Logan awoke, sunlight was streaming through the cabin windows. He blinked in confusion, momentarily disoriented. Then the events of the previous day and night came rushing back. The storm, the bears, the poachers, the journey to the rehabilitation center. A glance at his watch showed it was nearly noon. He had slept for over 6 hours, yet his body still felt heavy with exhaustion. Logan forced himself to sit up, wincing at the stiffness in his muscles. A hot shower helped restore some vitality, and the clean clothes someone had left folded on a chair, a bit too large but welcome nonetheless, made him feel almost human again. Outside, the storm had passed completely. The rehabilitation center was transformed in the bright winter sunlight, snow glistening on the rooftops and surrounding forest. Staff members moved purposefully between buildings, going about their daily routines. Logan made his way to the main building, drawn by the smell of coffee and the hope of news about the bears. Inside, he found Savannah and Doctor. Hayes huddled over a computer screen deep in conversation. They looked up as he entered. "Logan," Savannah greeted him with a smile. "You're just in time. We were about to check on your bears." "They're not my bears," Logan corrected automatically, though the words felt hollow even to his own ears. Dr. Hayes chuckled. "They might not agree with that assessment. The mother has been at the observation window several times this morning, seeming to look for someone. I have a strong suspicion it's you she's looking for." A warmth spread through Logan's chest at this news. Have they eaten? Are they doing okay? "They've taken some food and water," Dr. Hayes confirmed. "No obvious signs of injury or illness, though we still need to conduct proper examinations. The cubs appear playful and energetic, which is a good sign." "Would you like to see them?" Savannah asked, already knowing the answer. Logan nodded, trying not to appear too eager. But the truth was, he had been thinking about the bears from the moment he woke up, wondering how they were adjusting to their new surroundings. They walked to the bear enclosure together, Dr. Hayes explaining their rehabilitation protocols along the way. "Normally, we minimize human contact as much as possible. Wild bears need to maintain their natural wariness of humans for their own safety once they're released." He glanced at Logan. "Your bears present a unique challenge in that regard. The cubs, especially, have formed an unusual bond with you. We need to ensure they don't develop a dangerous habituation to humans in general." "I understand," Logan said, though the thought of deliberately distancing himself from the bears caused an unexpected pang of sadness. The bear enclosure looked different in daylight, more spacious and natural than it had appeared in the pre-dawn hours. Logan could see areas where the staff had scattered food, enrichment toys designed specifically for bears, and various climbing structures. At first, there was no sign of the bear family. The artificial den was too deep for Logan to see inside from the observation area. But as they watched, the smallest cub emerged, followed quickly by its siblings. They tumbled into the snow, playing with the exuberance of young animals who felt safe and well-fed. The mother bear appeared last, her massive form filling the den entrance. She paused, surveying the enclosure carefully before stepping into the open. Her head turned immediately toward the observation window, as if she had sensed Logan's presence. "Incredible," Dr. Hayes murmured as the mother bear walked directly to the window, her gaze fixed on Logan. She remembers you." Logan placed his hand against the glass. The mother bear studied him for a long moment, then made that familiar rumbling sound that Logan had come to interpret as recognition and acceptance. She turned away, moving to watch over her cubs as they played, but her relaxed posture suggested Logan's presence had reassured her. "I've never seen anything like it," Dr. Hayes admitted. "Bears have excellent memories, especially for threats, but this level of positive recognition of a human—" He shook his head in wonder. The smallest cub suddenly noticed Logan at the window. It abandoned its play immediately, bounding through the snow toward him with such enthusiasm that Logan couldn't help but smile. The cub placed its front paws against the glass, directly opposite Logan's hand, its dark eyes bright with what Logan could only interpret as excitement. "That's the one you carried, isn't it?" Savannah asked softly. Logan nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. The connection he felt with this particular cub was profound and inexplicable. It defied everything he thought he knew about wild animals. Dr. Hayes watched the interaction with scientific interest. "This presents both an opportunity and a challenge for us," he said thoughtfully. "On one hand, your presence clearly comforts them, which reduces stress and improves their chances of successful rehabilitation. On the other hand, they need to remain wild," Logan finished for him. "They can't come to see humans as friends or providers." "Exactly," Dr. Hayes confirmed. "But given the unusual circumstances, I think we might benefit from your involvement, at least initially. Would you be willing to stay and help us with their care for a few days? It would give us time to assess their health thoroughly and help them adjust to their temporary home." Logan didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said, his eyes still on the cub at the window. "I'd like that." "Excellent," Dr. Hayes said, clapping Logan on the shoulder. "Let's get you properly oriented with our facilities and protocols. If you're going to be part of our team, even temporarily, there's a lot you'll need to know." The next few days established a new routine for Logan. Each morning, he assisted the wildlife staff with food preparation for the various animals in their care. The rehabilitation center housed not only bears, but also injured wolves, orphaned mountain lion cubs, various birds of prey, and smaller mammals like foxes and raccoons. Each species required specific care protocols, which Logan absorbed with increasing interest. In the afternoons, he helped with the bear family specifically. Under Dr. Hayes' supervision, they conducted health assessments of each bear. The mother was first, sedated carefully to allow for a thorough examination. Logan stayed close throughout the procedure, speaking softly to her, even in her sedated state. "She's in remarkably good condition considering what she's been through," Dr. Hayes reported, completing his examination. "No injuries, good body weight, healthy coat. She's an exceptional mother." The cubs were examined next, one at a time. Each was given a small, harmless ear tag for identification purposes. The wildlife staff referred to them by numbers: Bear 23, 24, and 25. But Logan found himself thinking of them differently. The largest cub, more confident and assertive than its siblings, he thought of as bold. The middle cub, cautious but curious, became scout in his mind. And the smallest one, the cub he had carried through the blizzard, he privately named Spirit for its resilience and the unusual connection they shared. All three cubs were healthy, though Spirit was slightly underweight compared to its siblings. Dr. Hayes wasn't concerned. The runt of the litter often struggles a bit more, especially in harsh conditions. But this little one is a fighter. With proper nutrition and care, it should catch up quickly. In the evenings, Logan often found himself at the observation window, watching the bear family as they settled in for the night. Sometimes Savannah joined him, her quiet presence comfortable and undemanding. On the third evening, as they watched the bears together, she asked the question that had been on Logan's mind as well. What happens when it's time for them to go back to the wild? Logan didn't respond immediately. The question stirred complicated emotions. Pride that the bears would return to where they belonged, but also a deep sadness at the thought of never seeing them again. "They'll do fine," he said finally, with more confidence than he felt. "They're wild animals. This is just a temporary detour in their lives." Savannah studied him for a moment. "And you? What will you do when it's time to say goodbye?" Logan shrugged, uncomfortable with the personal nature of the question. "Go back to my life, I guess. My truck is probably a total loss, but insurance will cover it. I've got work waiting for me." "What kind of work do you do?" Savannah asked, seemingly genuinely interested. "I'm a wildlife photographer," Logan replied. "Freelance, mostly. I sell to magazines, websites, conservation organizations, whoever's buying." Savannah's eyebrows rose in surprise. "So you already had a connection to wildlife before all this happened?" Logan nodded. "I've always been more comfortable with animals than people. There's an honesty to them, a simplicity." He gestured toward the bear enclosure. "Though, I have to admit, this experience has challenged some of my assumptions about that simplicity." "How so?" Logan considered the question, trying to articulate the profound shift in his understanding. "I always respected wildlife, but I saw them as operating purely on instinct, predictable, in a way. But now—" He trailed off, watching a spirit playfully pounced on a pile of straw. "Now, you've seen something deeper," Savannah finished for him. "Yes," Logan agreed, "something like intelligence or emotional complexity. That mother bear made choices that went against her instincts. She trusted a human when everything in her evolutionary history should have told her to attack or flee." "Why?" Savannah smiled. "That's the question that brings many of us to this work. Once you recognize that other species have their own form of consciousness, their own way of understanding the world, it changes you." The conversation stayed with Logan long after Savannah had left for the night. He remained at the observation window, lost in thought as darkness fell and the bear family settled into their den. His week-long stay at the rehabilitation center stretched into 2 weeks, then 3. Logan found himself increasingly invested not only in the bear family but in the center's work as a whole. He volunteered for additional duties, learned about the various rehabilitation programs, and even put his photography skills to use documenting the animals for the center's records and educational materials. Dr. Hayes was impressed enough with Logan's contributions that he offered him a more formal position. "We could use someone with your skills and dedication," he said one evening as they reviewed the day's medical reports. "The photography alone would be valuable for our grant applications and public education efforts, and you have a way with the animals that can't be taught." The offer was tempting. Logan had always worked independently, roaming wherever the next photography assignment took him. The idea of staying in one place, becoming part of a community dedicated to wildlife protection, held a powerful appeal he hadn't expected. But before Logan could decide, a new development shifted everyone's focus. It began with subtle changes in the mother bear's behavior. She became restless, pacing the enclosure and showing less interest in food. The wildlife staff wasn't immediately concerned. Such behavior could indicate many things, from normal seasonal changes to minor discomfort. But when Spirit, the smallest cub, also began showing signs of distress, refusing food and staying close to its mother rather than playing with its siblings, Dr. Hayes grew worried. "We need to monitor them more closely," he told Logan and Savannah. "If this continues, we'll need to conduct another health assessment." By the next morning, Spirit's condition had worsened. The cub lay listlessly in the den, barely responding when its siblings tried to engage it in play. The mother bear stayed protectively close, growling whenever staff members approached the enclosure. "We need to examine that cub," Dr. Hayes decided, "but the mother's not going to make it easy." Logan stepped forward. "Let me help. She trusts me." Dr. Hayes hesitated. "It's risky, Logan. Her protective instincts are in overdrive right now. Even the strongest human-animal bond can be overwhelmed when a mother perceives a threat to her young." "I understand the risk," Logan said firmly. "But I also understand her. She knows I wouldn't hurt her cubs." After careful consideration and planning, they decided to attempt the examination with Logan's assistance. The protocol was clear. Logan would enter the enclosure first, alone, to gauge the mother bear's reaction. If she remained calm, the veterinary team would follow with the necessary equipment to sedate and examine Spirit. Logan's heart pounded as he approached the enclosure door. Despite his outward confidence, he was acutely aware of the danger. A frightened mother bear could kill a human with one swipe of her powerful paws. As the door slid open, Logan stepped into the enclosure, moving slowly and speaking in the calm, low voice he had used with the bears from the beginning. The mother bear emerged from the den, her posture tense and alert. "It's okay," Logan soothed, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "Your cub is sick. We want to help." The mother bear approached him, her head low, nostrils flaring as she took in his scent. Logan stood his ground, fighting the instinctive urge to retreat. This was the moment of truth. Would the trust they had built survive this test? After what seemed like an eternity, the mother bear made that familiar rumbling sound. She turned and walked back to the den entrance, then looked over her shoulder at Logan as if inviting him to follow. Logan released the breath he hadn't realized he was holding and gave the signal for the veterinary team to prepare to enter. "She's accepting my presence," he reported via the radio clipped to his jacket. "But move slowly when you come in." Inside the den, Logan found Spirit curled in a tight ball, its breathing rapid and shallow. The other two cubs watched from a corner, subdued by their siblings' distress. The mother bear positioned herself protectively but did not interfere as Logan knelt beside the sick cub. "What's happening to you, little one?" Logan murmured, gently touching Spirit's fur. The cub was hot, too hot, its body radiating an unnatural warmth. Dr. Hayes and his assistant entered the den cautiously, carrying medical equipment. The mother bear growled low in her throat, but remained where she was, her eyes fixed on Logan as if taking her cues from him. "Fever," Dr. Hayes confirmed after a quick assessment. "Elevated heart rate, labored breathing. We need to sedate and get a more thorough examination." The procedure was tense but successful. The mother bear, miraculously, allowed them to work, though she never took her eyes off her cub. Perhaps she somehow understood they were trying to help, or perhaps her trust in Logan extended to those he brought with him. Whatever the reason, it allowed Dr. Hayes to conduct a complete examination. The diagnosis was pneumonia, a serious but treatable condition. "The cold and stress weakened its immune system," Dr. Hayes explained as they administered antibiotics. "But we've caught it relatively early. With proper treatment and care, the prognosis is good." Logan stayed in the den with the bears throughout the day and into the evening, monitoring Spirit's condition and providing updates to the veterinary team. The mother bear remained close, occasionally nudging Logan's hand with her nose as if seeking reassurance. As night fell, Logan knew he should leave the enclosure. The protocols were clear. No staff member remained with the animals overnight for safety reasons. But as he prepared to go, Spirit stirred and let out a weak whimper. The sound tugged at Logan's heart. "Just a little longer," he murmured, settling back down beside the cub. The mother bear watched, then did something extraordinary. She moved to Logan's side and settled her massive body next to his, creating a warm barrier between him and the den entrance. Her cubs, including the two healthy ones, nestled in the space between them. It was as if she had accepted Logan as a part of their family unit, a co-protector of her vulnerable young. Logan sent a quick text to Dr. Hayes, "Staying with the bears tonight. Mother is calm. Will monitor Spirit's condition." The response came quickly. "Unprecedented but approved under the circumstances. Emergency team on standby if needed. Be careful, Logan." That night, as Logan sat in the dim den surrounded by the bear family, he experienced a profound sense of connection that transcended the usual boundaries between humans and wildlife. The mother bear's trust, the cub's acceptance, the shared concern for Spirit's well-being, all of it spoke to something deeper than he had ever experienced in his solitary life. When morning came, Logan awoke to find Spirit stirring with more energy, the antibiotics beginning to take effect. The cub's fever had broken during the night, and though it was still weak, there was a noticeable improvement in its condition. As Logan reported the good news to Dr. Hayes via radio, he became aware of a commotion outside the enclosure. Raised voices, rapid footsteps, the sound of vehicles approaching the center at a high speed. Savannah appeared at the observation window, her expression urgent. "Logan, you need to get out of there, now." "What's happening?" Logan asked, rising carefully so as not to disturb the bears. "The poachers we arrested?" "They were part of a larger operation. Their associates have been tracked to this area. We think they're coming for the bears." Savannah's voice was tense. "Law enforcement is on the way, but we need to move the bears to a secure location immediately." Logan's blood ran cold. The bear family, just beginning to recover from their ordeal, was once again in danger. "How much time do we have?" "Minutes, maybe," Savannah replied. "We're evacuating all high-risk animals to our underground facility. The transport team is on their way to your location now." Logan looked at the mother bear, who had risen to her feet, sensing his alarm. Her cubs huddled behind her, including Spirit, still weak but alert. "We need to move them quickly," Logan said, "but the mother's going to be protective, especially with Spirit still recovering." "That's why we need you," Savannah explained. "The team can't safely tranquilize them. It's too risky for the sick cub. They need to cooperate, and you're our best chance at making that happen." The gravity of the situation hit Logan fully. The bond he had formed with these bears wasn't just unusual or scientifically interesting. It could be the key to their survival. "Tell them I'll have the bears ready," Logan said with determination. "But we'll need to move slowly and carefully. No sudden movements, no loud noises." As Logan prepared the bear family for transport, explaining to the mother in low, soothing tones what was happening, he could hear the increasing activity outside. Staff members were moving quickly to secure the facility, radios crackling with updates on the approaching threat. The transport team arrived with a large, reinforced cage mounted on wheels. Logan guided the bears toward it, encouraging the mother to lead her cubs inside. To everyone's amazement, she complied, though her wary eyes never left Logan's face. "That's it," Logan encouraged as the last cub, Scout, entered the cage. "You're going to be safe." As the team secured the cage door, Savannah rushed up, breathless. "They're here, multiple vehicles, armed men. Police are 5 minutes out, but that might be too late." "Where's the secure facility?" Logan asked, moving alongside the transport cage as the team began wheeling it toward a service elevator built into the hillside behind the main building. Underground bunker designed for exactly this scenario, Savannah explained. Originally built as a fallout shelter during the Cold War, retrofitted for animal protection, climate-controlled, multiple security layers, completely hidden from casual observation. They had just reached the service elevator when the sound of breaking glass echoed from the main building, followed by shouting and the crash of equipment being overturned. The poachers had forced their way in. "Go," Savannah ordered the transport team. "Get the bears below. Logan, you go with them. I need to help secure the other animals." Logan hesitated, torn between staying with the bears and helping defend the facility. The mother bear made a distressed sound from inside the cage, her eyes fixed on him. "We need you with the bears," Dr. Hayes said firmly, joining them at the elevator. "The mother trusts you. If she panics underground, it could be dangerous for everyone." The decision made, Logan stepped into the elevator with the transport cage. As the doors began to close, he caught a final glimpse of Savannah and Dr. Hayes hurrying toward the main building, where the sounds of confrontation were growing louder. The elevator descended rapidly, carrying Logan and the bear family deep beneath the rehabilitation center. The mother bear remained surprisingly calm, perhaps sensing that they were moving away from danger rather than toward it. Spirit and its siblings huddled together, wide-eyed but quiet. When the elevator doors opened, Logan found himself in a large, concrete chamber that branched off into several corridors. Staff members in protective gear were moving purposefully, directing other animal transports to specific areas. "Bear enclosure is this way," a technician informed Logan, guiding the transport cage down one of the corridors. "We've prepared a space that mimics their above-ground habitat as much as possible." The underground bear enclosure was smaller than the one above, but thoughtfully designed, with artificial lighting that simulated daylight, a small water feature, climbing structures, and a den area. The temperature was carefully controlled to match the bear's needs. As soon as the cage door was opened, the mother bear guided her cubs to the den, establishing their safe space in this new environment. Logan stayed nearby, his presence continuing to reassure them despite the strange surroundings. For the next several hours, Logan remained with the bears, speaking soothingly whenever distant sounds of activity filtered down from above. Occasionally, staff members would arrive with updates. Law enforcement had arrived, the poachers had been intercepted, the facility was being secured. Finally, Savannah appeared, looking exhausted but relieved. "It's over," she announced. "Police arrested 4 men. They were heavily armed and had specialized equipment for capturing and transporting large animals. They came specifically for these bears." "Why?" Logan asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Why so much effort for one bear family?" Savannah's expression hardened. "The exotic animal trade is a billion-dollar industry. Mother bears with cubs fetch an especially high price. The cubs go to private collections or roadside zoos. The mother ... She didn't finish the sentence, but Logan could fill in the blank. The mother would be killed, her parts sold on the black market for use in traditional medicines and luxury items. "How did they know the bears were here?" Logan asked. "This facility isn't exactly advertised." Savannah sighed heavily. "That's the worst part. We had a security breach. Someone on the inside has been feeding information to poaching networks. They knew exactly where to find the bears because they were told." The revelation sent a chill through Logan. The bears weren't safe here, not anymore. Not if the facility's security had been compromised. "What happens now?" he asked. "We've initiated emergency protocols. All high-risk animals will be relocated to partner facilities across the country within the next 48 hours. Savannah glanced at the bear family in their temporary den. "Including your bears." "Where will they go?" Logan asked, already feeling the familiar pang of impending separation. "That's what I came to discuss with you," Savannah replied, her expression softening. "Dr. Hayes and I have been talking. These bears have a unique situation. Their trust in you is unprecedented, and it could be traumatic for them, especially the cubs, to be suddenly separated from you after everything they've been through." Logan waited, sensing there was more. "We have a proposal," Savannah continued. "There's a remote wildlife sanctuary in northern Montana, operated by a conservation trust I used to work for. It's thousands of acres of protected land, virtually inaccessible to the public. They have a small research station focused on bear behavior and ecology. You want to send the bears there?" Logan surmised. "Yes," Savannah confirmed, "and we want you to go with them." The proposal took Logan by surprise. "Me? In what capacity?" "Initially as a transition assistant to help the bears adjust to their new environment, but the sanctuary has been looking for a wildlife photographer to document their research work. It could be a more permanent position if you're interested." Logan looked at the bear family, at Bold and Scout playing together, at Spirit resting but visibly improving, at the mother watching over them all with fierce protectiveness. The thought of continuing to be part of their journey, of seeing them safely established in a new home, was powerfully appealing. And yet, it would mean a complete change of course for his own life. No more freelancing, no more solitary wandering from assignment to assignment. It would mean commitment to a place, to a purpose, to these bears that had somehow worked their way into his heart. "When would we leave?" Logan asked, his decision already forming. "Tomorrow morning," Savannah replied. "We have a specialized transport vehicle being prepared. The journey will take about 2 days, with stops to check on the bears' well-being." Logan nodded slowly. "I'll need to get my equipment from my cabin, make some calls to cancel upcoming assignments." Savannah smiled, recognizing the acceptance in his words. "I'll help you with whatever you need." That night, as Logan sat with the bears in their underground shelter, he reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had led him to this moment. What had begun as a simple drive through the mountains had become a journey of discovery, about these remarkable animals, about the depths of connection possible between species, and about himself. The mother bear, now accustomed to his presence, rested her massive head near his leg. Logan gently stroked her fur, still amazed that she allowed such familiarity. Spirit, continuing to improve, had settled against his side, while Bold and Scout nestled against their mother. "Tomorrow we start a new journey," Logan told them softly. "I don't know exactly what awaits us, but we'll face it together." The smallest cub stirred, looking up at him with those intelligent eyes that seemed to understand far more than a wild animal should. In that moment, Logan knew with absolute certainty that he had made the right decision. Whatever happened next, their paths would remain intertwined. The man who had opened his truck door to a desperate mother bear in a blizzard, and the bear family that had taught him the true meaning of trust, courage, and connection. The journey to the Montana sanctuary began before dawn the next morning. The specialized transport vehicle, essentially a mobile wildlife enclosure, had been prepared overnight with all the necessities for keeping the bear family comfortable during the long drive. Thick straw bedding covered the floor, water dispensers were secured to the walls, and special compartments held food that could be delivered without opening the main doors. Logan rode in the back with the bears, despite the staff's initial concerns about safety. The mother bear remained surprisingly calm throughout the loading process, following Logan's gentle guidance into the transport vehicle without resistance. The cubs, including Spirit, who was still recovering but noticeably stronger, stayed close to their mother, curious about this new adventure but not distressed. Savannah joined the transport team, riding in the cab of the vehicle while Logan remained with the bears. Every few hours, they stopped in secluded areas to check on the animals' well-being and allow Logan a brief respite from the confines of the transport compartment. During one such stop, as they stood in a quiet forest clearing allowing the vehicle to air out, Savannah handed Logan a thick folder. "What's this?" he asked, leafing through pages of maps, photographs, and handwritten notes. "Everything we know about the bears," Savannah explained. "Their estimated ages, health records, behavioral observations, likely territory of origin. Dr. Hayes thought the sanctuary researchers would want as much information as possible." Logan studied the documents with interest. According to the estimates, the mother bear was approximately 8 years old, in her prime for a wild bear. The cubs, born the previous spring, were about 10 months old. They would typically remain with their mother for another year or more before venturing out on their own. "There's something else you should know," Savannah said, her expression serious. "We've been in contact with the sanctuary director. They're aware of the unusual bond between you and the bears, but their ultimate goal remains the same as ours: to return these bears to a fully wild state." Logan nodded, understanding the implication. "You mean I'll need to step back eventually, let them be truly wild again?" "Yes," Savannah confirmed gently. "It will be a gradual process. Your presence will be crucial for their initial adjustment, but over time, the sanctuary staff will work to minimize human interaction, including yours." Though Logan had known this intellectually, hearing it stated so plainly stirred complicated emotions. He had grown deeply attached to these bears, especially Spirit. The thought of deliberately distancing himself from them was painful. Yet he understood it was necessary for their long-term welfare. "I understand," he said finally. "That's what's best for them." Savannah studied him with sympathetic eyes. "It won't happen all at once. And the sanctuary's research program means you'll still be able to observe them, document their progress with your photography. You just won't be able to interact with them the way you do now." Logan looked back toward the transport vehicle, where he could see the mother bear watching him through the ventilation openings. As long as they're safe and free, that's what matters. The remainder of the journey passed without incident. The bears adapted well to the routine of travel, resting during transport and showing interest but not distress during the scheduled stops. Spirit continued to improve, playing more actively with its siblings and showing better appetite. When they finally arrived at the sanctuary on the second evening, Logan was immediately struck by the remote beauty of the location. Nestled in a valley surrounded by mountains, the research station was a cluster of rustic buildings that blended harmoniously with the natural environment. Beyond the station stretched thousands of acres of protected wilderness, forests, meadows, streams, and rocky outcroppings that would provide an ideal habitat for the bear family. The sanctuary director, Lily Morgan, greeted them upon arrival. She was older than Logan had expected, perhaps in her early 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a practical braid and eyes that reflected decades of experience with wildlife. "Welcome to Bear Haven," she said, her handshake firm and confident. "Savannah's told me about your extraordinary experience with these bears. I've been working with grizzlies for 40 years, and I've never heard anything quite like it." Logan felt a sudden defensiveness, anticipating skepticism or dismissal of the bond he shared with the bear family. But Lily's next words surprised him. "Nature is full of exceptions and mysteries," she continued. "Just when we think we understand the rules, something comes along that challenges everything we thought we knew." She smiled warmly. "I'm looking forward to learning from what you and these bears have to teach us." Relief washed over Logan. Lily wasn't doubting him or treating the situation as a mere curiosity. She was approaching it with genuine scientific interest and respect. The transfer of the bears to their new temporary enclosure went smoothly. Unlike the rehabilitation center facility, this enclosure was vast. Nearly 5 acres of natural woodland surrounded by a high, specialized fence designed to contain bears without harming them. A man-made den had been prepared, similar to the one at the rehabilitation center but larger and more naturalistic. As Logan guided the bear family into their new space, he was struck by a bittersweet realization. This was another step toward their eventual return to true freedom. Each transition, from his truck to the rehabilitation center, from the center to this sanctuary, moved them further from the desperate circumstances that had first brought them together and closer to the independent, wild existence they deserved. The mother bear seemed to sense something significant about this new location. She explored the enclosure thoroughly, investigating the den, testing the trees for climbing, sniffing at the various plants and natural features. The cubs followed her example, though they frequently returned to Logan for reassurance. "They'll acclimate quickly," Lily observed, watching from the observation area. "This environment is much closer to their natural habitat than the rehabilitation facility, and having you here will ease the transition." Over the next week, Logan settled into life at the sanctuary. He was given a small cabin near the bear enclosure and assigned official duties that combined his photography skills with his unique ability to observe the bear family's behavior. Each day, he spent several hours in the enclosure with the bears, gradually reducing the time as they became more comfortable with their surroundings. Spirit, now fully recovered from pneumonia, had developed a routine of greeting Logan with particular enthusiasm whenever he entered the enclosure. The little cub would bound toward him, stopping just short of physical contact as if remembering its wild nature, then circle around him with playful energy before returning to its family. "That cub has imprinted on you in a way I've never seen before," Lily commented one evening as they reviewed Logan's photographs and notes. "Not like a domestic animal would. It's still very much a wild bear, but there's a recognition there, a connection that goes beyond normal bear behavior." Logan nodded, flipping through images of Spirit playing with its siblings. "I carried it through the blizzard when it was too weak to walk. Maybe that created some kind of bond." "Perhaps," Lily agreed. "Or perhaps it's something we don't fully understand yet. That's why documentation like yours is so valuable. It helps us question our assumptions about wildlife behavior." As weeks turned into months, the sanctuary's approach to the bear family gradually shifted, as Savannah had prepared Logan to expect. The frequency and duration of human interaction were systematically reduced. Feeding became more naturalistic, with food hidden throughout the enclosure to encourage foraging behavior. New challenges and enrichment activities were introduced to stimulate the bear's natural problem-solving abilities. Logan's role evolved as well. His direct contact with the bears decreased, but his observation and documentation work intensified. From specially designed blinds and observation platforms, he captured the bear family's growing independence with his cameras. His photographs, intimate, detailed studies of bear behavior rarely seen by human eyes, began to attract attention in wildlife conservation circles. The mother bear adapted readily to these changes, her wild instincts reasserting themselves as she taught her cubs to forage, climb, and navigate their environment. Bold and Scout followed her lead eagerly, their natural bear behaviors becoming more pronounced with each passing day. Spirit, however, continued to seek Logan out whenever possible. Even as the scheduled interaction times decreased, the smallest cub would often appear at the edge of the enclosure closest to Logan's cabin, as if sensing his presence and hoping for acknowledgement. "It's going to be hardest on that one when we move to the next phase," Lily observed one afternoon, watching as Spirit stood at the fence line, gazing toward the research station. The final transition back to the wild. Logan had been anticipating and dreading this moment. After 6 months at the sanctuary, the bear family was ready for the final stage of rehabilitation, release into the larger protected wilderness beyond the enclosure. They would be fitted with tracking collars to allow monitoring of their movements and health, but otherwise left to fend entirely for themselves. "When?" Logan asked simply. 2 weeks, Lily replied. "The timing is perfect. Spring is fully established, food sources are abundant, and the cubs have had nearly their full development time with their mother. They're ready." Logan nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. He had known from the beginning that this day would come, that success in this case meant saying goodbye. But knowing something intellectually and facing it emotionally were very different challenges. The 2 weeks passed with bittersweet intensity. Logan spent as much time as possible observing and photographing the bear family, creating a visual record of their journey that had begun in a desperate blizzard and would end with their return to freedom. Each image captured not just the bear's physical recovery and growth, but the ineffable spirit that had drawn Logan to them from the beginning. On the morning of the release, a small team gathered at the enclosure. Lily and her staff would handle the technical aspects, fitting the tracking collars, opening the special gate that led to the wider wilderness, monitoring the bear's initial movements. Logan's official role was to document the release with his cameras, but everyone understood the deeper significance of his presence. The mother bear and cubs were sedated briefly for the collaring procedure. As they began to wake, the team retreated to a safe distance, leaving only Logan near the gate that would soon be opened remotely. The mother bear was the first to fully regain consciousness, rising to her feet with a wobbly determination that quickly steadied. She immediately checked on her cubs, nudging each one gently until they too began to stir. Bold and Scout recovered quickly, shaking their heads as if to clear the lingering effects of the sedation. Spirit was the last to fully awaken. The smallest cub struggled to its feet, disoriented and clearly distressed. It looked around frantically until its gaze found Logan, standing near the gate. With single-minded purpose, Spirit made its way toward him, stopping just a few feet away. For a long moment, bear and man regarded each other in silence. In Spirit's dark eyes, Logan saw something that transcended the usual boundaries between human and wild animal, a recognition, an understanding, perhaps even gratitude. He had no words for what passed between them in that moment, but he knew it would stay with him for the rest of his life. "It's time," Logan said softly, speaking to Spirit but knowing the words were really for himself. "Time for you to be what you were always meant to be, wild and free." As if understanding, Spirit made a soft sound, not quite a growl, not quite a whimper, and then turned away, moving back to rejoin its mother and siblings. The bear family gathered together, their attention now drawn to the opening gate and the wilderness beyond. Logan stepped back, raising his camera to capture these final moments. Through his lens, he watched as the mother bear cautiously approached the open gate, testing the air and surveying the forest beyond. After a thorough assessment, she stepped through, followed closely by Bold and Scout. Spirit hesitated at the threshold, looking back one last time. Logan lowered his camera, wanting to experience this moment directly, not through a lens. The smallest cub held his gaze for a heartbeat, then turned and bounded after its family, disappearing into the verdant wilderness of its new home. As the gate closed automatically behind the bears, Logan felt both loss and fulfillment. The bears were where they belonged now, living the free, wild lives they were meant to live. Their extraordinary journey, from desperate survival in a blizzard to this moment of liberation, had come full circle. "You did it," Lily said quietly, joining him at the observation point. "You saved them." Logan shook his head slightly. "We saved each other," he corrected, his voice rough with emotion. "They taught me as much as I helped them." In the months and years that followed, Logan remained at the sanctuary, building a new life around wildlife photography and conservation work. His photographs and the story of the bear family became powerful tools for education and advocacy, helping to secure additional protections for bears and their habitats throughout the region. The tracking collars allowed the sanctuary team to monitor the bear family's progress as they established their territory in the protected wilderness. They thrived in their natural environment, the mother bear expertly guiding her growing cubs through the seasons. When the time came, as it naturally does in bear families, Bold and Scout gradually separated from their mother, establishing territories of their own. Spirit, however, chose a territory that consistently overlapped with the area nearest to the sanctuary. Though fully wild and independent, the smallest cub, now a young adult bear, was occasionally observed at the edges of the sanctuary property, particularly near Logan's cabin. Logan never approached these rare visitations, understanding the importance of maintaining Spirit's wild nature. But sometimes, in the quiet dawn hours, he would sit on his porch with his camera, documenting from a distance as the bear foraged or rested at the forest edge. And occasionally, just occasionally, Spirit would pause and look directly at the cabin, as if acknowledging the enduring connection between them. On one such morning, 5 years after the release, Logan sat reviewing his latest photographs when Savannah's familiar voice called out a greeting. She visited the sanctuary periodically, her work with the Forest Service often bringing her to the region. "I brought something you might want to see," she said, joining him on the porch and handing him a folder. Inside was a series of satellite images showing a newly designated wildlife corridor connecting several protected areas, including the sanctuary's lands. The final image showed the completed paperwork for an expanded conservation zone, thousands of additional acres now protected from development and poaching. "The Spirit Bear Initiative," Logan read from the document's heading. Savannah smiled. "Named after a certain persistent cub. Your photographs and the story of your experience with those bears helped make this happen." The public response was overwhelming. Logan studied the maps, noting how the new protected areas created an unbroken wilderness that would benefit not just bears, but countless other species as well. "They'll be safer now," he said, thinking of the bear family that had changed his life. "Yes," Savannah agreed, "and so will their cubs, and their cubs' cubs." She pointed to a notation on one of the maps. "We've confirmed Spirit is female, by the way. The tracking data suggests she may have cubs of her own next spring." The news filled Logan with unexpected emotion. The circle of life continuing, extending beyond the remarkable journey he had been privileged to witness and share. As they talked, a movement at the forest edge caught Logan's attention. He reached for his camera reflexively, focusing on the tree line. There, partially obscured by foliage but unmistakable to Logan's experienced eye, stood Spirit. The young bear watched the cabin for a long moment, then melted back into the forest, wild, free, and thriving in the world she was born to inhabit. "Did you see that?" Savannah asked, following his gaze. Logan nodded, lowering his camera with a smile. "Just a reminder," he said softly. "Some connections never truly end, they just change form." As he spoke, snow began to fall gently, the first of the season. Logan watched the white flakes drifting down, remembering a desperate night in a blizzard when a mother bear had asked for his help and he had opened his door to the unknown. That single decision had set in motion a journey he could never have imagined, leading him to a new understanding of courage, trust, and the profound connections that can form between all living beings when barriers fall away. In the distance, barely audible above the whisper of falling snow, came the sound of a bear's call, wild and free, echoing across the protected wilderness that was now, thanks to an extraordinary encounter between man and bear, a little more secure for generations to come.